It's hard to see change when change can be so slow and incremental. Sometimes a bike comes out in a sea of offerings and no one really notices. It flies under the radar. We have been so overwhelmed with choice that we miss what's in front of our own eyes.
And it's a shame, because this could have been the story of the CF Moto 800 MTX. That X at the end is more than just a letter designation. On the face of it, my hopes were high.
The more I rode it, the more I wanted to compare it with the greats. But life is made of compromise, and this time, could the compromises be a bit too much? If something seems too good to be true, it most likely is. Right?
Okay, let's take a step back from the metaphoric intro. There is a reason why this motorcycle is so important, and that's because it's CF Moto's first of its kind.
An 800cc middleweight adventure bike focused on one thing in particular, going off the beaten path. And this path is a bit of a stranger for CF Moto, as their midweight platform has never been that acclaimed at it. It's a side of adventuring that's easy to dabble in, as they saw with their previous road-biased MTs, but almost impossible to master. And that's how I will look at this bike, as someone who wants to go off-road. Proper off-road. Full disclosure, this motorcycle has been fitted with proper enduro tires in the dirt bike handlebar, but other than that, it's mostly running in stock form. Oh, it's also lost its cat somewhere along the way. First things first, the essentials. In order to really shine off-road, a motorcycle needs to tick as many of these boxes as possible. A low fuel tank to improve the weight distribution. A girthy 48mm fork setup featuring 230 mils of suspension travel, coupled with a generous 240 mils of ground clearance. It must have an 1821 wheel setup and hopefully have those wheels be tubeless.
When you look at all of this criteria, you're left with less bikes than you would imagine. These are specifications that not many models possess, but specs that are sure to make any off-road enthusiast grin.
Specs that ultimately show what the bike is really made for. Not advertised for, but really made for doing. And the CF here ticks all those boxes. It's a bike that, on top of everything, has another huge ace up its sleeve, one that not even KTM or Yamaha could match. But also a bike that's seemingly hindered by questionable choices and misconceptions, at least on the face of it. But change is slow and incremental. The CF does nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that hasn't been done before. It's not a new design, and many of its features can be found within its competitors. In fact, not many. Every single one of its features. There is no running away from it. At its core, this is still a CF Moto 800. Still the same 800cc parallel twin, developing horsepower figures in the mid-90s. The same engine derived from KTM's old 790 platform, with the same old characteristics. Decent low-down torque, though not groundbreaking, and a good punch from mid-revs onward. Where CF Moto have modified things is in the engine mapping. On one hand, I found the throttle smooth enough. Some people would call it jerky. Personally, I didn't feel much of that.
Maybe it's because of my riding style, but at least when off-roading, I honestly never noticed it. It might not be the smoothest, but it's more than fine for me.
Then you have the riding modes, where an off-road setting aims to provide an aggressive power delivery, instantaneous. It responds quickly like a carved two-stroke would.
Unlike KTM's off-road mode, it's precise and sharp, which is good, unless you need to actually put down all that power on wet terrain. For that, switching it to rain mode while having the traction control permanently disabled actually proved to be an interesting hack.
Again, none of this is new. Old engine, old tricks. And that could mean old problems too?
What's not a problem is this video sponsor, the Red Bull Romaniacs Adventure Class.
A race meant to take adventure bikes back where they belong, to explore the Carpathian Mountains and challenge the riders in a beautiful, yet raw setting.
You should come to use the bike for what it's made for. Going in the mountains. Some people climb mountains, Kilimanjaro or whatever. Some run a marathon, and others are doing the Red Bull Romaniacs.
Here I have Klaus, who's the man in charge of basically putting you through your paces.
So there are two classes. The light, which is the easiest one, and ultimate, which is a more demanding track. Light is very scenic, beautiful trails, but from time to time, we throw in something that gets you sweating. And ultimate, it's something else. It needs to be a two-cylinder bike. You need not to be the best rider in the world, but still some level is good for the light class. If you want to do the ultimate, you should have some hard enduro experience. Know how the clutch is working in the lower gears, first and second gear, going over some rocks. There's not big step-ups or stuff like this, but there will be some proper downhills. There will also be some long uphills where you need to be on the gas for more than just a few seconds.
You don't need to be Paul Tares or Kevin Gallas to do this, right?
No, that's important, yeah. What they are doing on these bikes it's something else. You don't need to be a level at what they are riding. If you know how the bike works, if you can move it around, you're good to go.
Let's talk about cheese. You probably know where this is going. That 790 engine has a bit of a reputation of turning cams into the finest cheddar. Now, how big or small of an issue that actually is, that's another discussion.
What's clear is, this reputation made many people shy away from the LC8C engine platform. And that's exactly the engine on which this CF Moto plant is based on. Now, allegedly, the Chinese manufacturer had reworked the head and oil pump, basically eliminating the issue at hand. Looking online, that seems to be an accurate assessment, as not much evidence of CF Moto engine failures seemed to arise.
Now, I can't open this engine up. Even if I did, I wouldn't know what to look at. But with my own money, I wouldn't personally have this as a concern. That's my personal opinion.
Going fast is good and everything, but stopping a two-wheeled object can prove even tougher. And that's where the second controversial aspect comes in, the braking system. This CF has J-Dron brakes, front and rear, and if you're as ignorant as I was, you would have assumed they're a Chinese brand.
Well, the J in J-Dron actually stands for Jose. They're as Spanish as they get.
As a company, they were founded in the late 40s by Don Jose Juan, and by mid-60s they were already producing hydraulic components for braking systems. Ever since, they opened offices and production facilities in China, Tokyo, and the USA. In fact, ever since 2021, the Brembo Group actually acquired this manufacturer. Now, who else could be relying on J-Dron components? None others than Moto 3 and Moto 2 teams, the Kawasaki World Superbike team, and SSV teams in Rally Raid. Long story short, this is a company that has a proven track record of quality and top-of-the-line hydraulic components. They're not just an unknown Chinese brand.
Speaking of unknown Chinese brand, let's talk suspension. It's not from KYB, as many influencers had led you to believe. It's in fact by Yuan. Okay, this time we are in fact talking about a Chinese company, but it's also one with a bit of history behind it.
They've been building suspension components since 1986 in the Chinese heart of automotive manufacturing, Chongqing. Currently employing over 1,000 people, they've been a supplier and collaborator for Zontes, CF Moto, Vogue, Yamaha, Suzuki, and Piaggio. In fact, Yuan is the same manufacturer producing the units for Kovei's base-level 450cc rally bike.
What's my point here? Look, the market evolved. China and their products evolved as well. And the country's evolution is a good metaphor for CF Moto's path. The manufacturer's reputation went from shoddy to top of the line in the realm of ATVs.
Same with bikes. Their first 800 was a humble beginning. But then they came out with a punch with a 450 MT, showing the world that they knew what people wanted. That they could build a motorcycle to not only be price competitive, but be best in class. And now, finally, they're doing the same in the middleweight adventure class, with the MTX.
Now, okay, talking is good and everything, but how good of an off-roader this new edition actually is?
I came down to Sibiu to test it out on the tracks of the upcoming Red Bull Romaniacs adventure class. from the easy light class to the treacherous ultimate one. This should be a proper test for the CF, because if it wants to be considered a real contender for the off-road crown, it needs to tackle the wildest, toughest terrain there is.
Here on the Romaniacs trails, there's going to be two options, the light and the ultimate. Here is an example of the ultimate, and let's see if the CF Moto can actually do it. This is a nasty downhill. Oh shit. Ow. Well, e-bike mode works. Come on, mighty CF. Ow. Fucking hell. Ooh. Oh god.
Those brakes I mentioned earlier, for off-roading, they are more than adequate. One finger is all you will ever need, and brake fade was never a part of the conversation. On the road, they stop you well, maybe not as sharp as the brakes on an 890R, but honestly they're good enough, on par with many others. That Chinese suspension was actually better than I hoped for. Fully adjustable with long travel meant that bottoming out was never a worry in my mind. I'm sure you could, but most likely won't be by accident. It's a bit stiffer than other setups, but what the Strays allows for is stability at speed. And when the internals have to give up, when the going gets too rough and rocky, when only the highest end of setups will do, the CF has another saving grace. An integrated steering damper. One that actually works. In these rock gardens, I could feel the front sometimes skimming over the rocks, but the damper meant that it never got out of line.
In a way, it was still stable, even when losing control. Look, I'm not absurd here. This is not the best suspension system on the market. But damn, it's not bad either. Sure, when lifting the wheel, you can hear a little clunk. Sure, it's not at the level of the WPs on an 890 Adventure R.
But I do feel more confident on this bike than on a stock 10RA or 790 Adventure, which I think really says a lot. And then there is the weight, which is one of the biggest misconceptions and greatest things about this motorcycle. Fully fueled up, this comes in at 220 kilos. That's according to CF Moto at least, so take it with a grain of salt. What's important is, when you take into account the amount of fuel this can carry, that's actually not too bad. And then, unlike any other non-Austrian motorcycle, it carries all that fuel down low, which makes any weight figure irrelevant. The best way I could describe it, it minimizes the movements you need to input in order to keep balance at low speeds, thus fatiguing you less. You feel more in control.
Look, it's still a big heavy pig, just like any other big heavy pig. But unlike some other bikes, like the 10RAs of this world, it doesn't feel intimidating. It feels savable.
It feels like I could dab my foot and not drop the bike. And this gave me confidence. It genuinely feels incredibly similar to riding an 890R, which for those who know, is an incredible compliment. One thing that's clear, the designers considered approachability when working on this machine. Sure, it looks cool and aggressive, but its ergonomics just work. I can grip the bike well with my knees and the seat height is okay. With my altitude problems at 172 centimeters, I felt like I could manage it much easier than something like a Yamaha. Yes, you can't corner it like a dirt bike with a foot out because of those pods, but that's a compromise I'm more than willing to make.
Reading back this video script, I keep coming back to one bike, the KTM 890 Adventure R.
A bike that shouldn't ever be mentioned in the same sentence as the CF. It shouldn't be a fair comparison. In fact, it shouldn't even be a comparison at all. And yet, the more I think about it...
On paper, it's not exactly fair to put them against each other, but they they do have a lot of similarities.
The closest motorcycle in feel to this CF Moto is, indeed, an 890 Adventure R.
The balance of the bike feels fairly similar. Sit a little bit more on top on the 800, the CF, where the KTM is a little bit closer to the ground.
And that's a wild thing to say, I know. But actually, for some things, the CF is outright better. The windshield is better for touring, being adjustable and actually helpful on the road, while not chopping your neck when leaving the pavement. The clutch feels lighter than the 890, even though they're literally the same place and system. In fact, one finger is all you'll ever need to control this unit. Now, sure, the 890R has more torque down low. The engine feels 5% better all around. Then the suspension, which is clearly superior on the orange pumpkin.
Maybe the biggest difference, I would say, would be the suspension. So obviously you pay a lot more money for this bike, so some difference should be there, and I would say it would be on the suspension. This is totally stock. It's doing the job from what I'm doing, checking the tracks and riding all the trails around. This is okay, but this is where you could upgrade if you want like a real race bike. You could put some other suspension on it.
Look, while we can compare them all day long, let's not kid ourselves. This 890R is clearly a better bike, but simply the fact that the CF Moto is mentioned in the same sentence, the mere existence of this video segment should say plenty.
And unlike the KTM, with this MTX you get a similar 22-liter fuel tank, an M button on the bars that, if held for 3 seconds, immediately turns off the street ABS. You heard that, Yamaha? Crazy! You get a quick menu to disable the quick shifter so that your dirt bike boot doesn't accidentally touch the shifter and cut the power like a communist dictator. Oh, and that quick shifter, alongside a slipper clutch, a tire pressure monitoring system, and tubeless wheels, and cruise control, all of that is standard.
After a long day in the mountains going home, I had it yesterday. I just put it on the cruise control and just relaxing, going back to the office, which is nice.
The only choice you have left is if you want it with Barbie pink accents or boring black. You see, there was an old saying, and it went something like, comparison is the thief of joy. But sometimes we need to compare our choices. In our case, we can look at a base Tenere. While a proven, reliable platform, its seat height and weight make it unfriendly to a big number of riders. The lack of cruise control or tubeless wheels make it a crude option as well. And the 210 mils of travel are simply not as good. You have the Aprilia Touareg, which improves the weight distribution of its fuel tank and the suspension travel, but features thinner forks and a center of gravity that's still taller than our CF. The Transalp could be another option, but with no cruise control and a pathetic 200 mils of suspension travel, it shares the downsides of the Yamaha, with even less off-roading credentials. KTM is an interesting entry, as their entry-level 790 Adventure could be a good comparison, but its suspension setup is clearly more road-biased. On the other hand, you have the 890R, which feels really similar, but with better ground clearance and more suspension. And finally, the Cove X100X Pro, a bike that still features a higher-placed fuel tank, and lacks cruise control, which, call me petty, but I really care about that.
Comparable in many other aspects, but a brand that still lacks the manufacturer's support in many countries out there, including mine, especially when compared to CF Moto. That being said, I would love to try it one day, so I'll reserve judgment on it until. On paper, none of these other motorcycles stand out. The CF isn't clearly worse than any of them.
And now for the pièce de résistance, the final blow. Let's talk pricing. Where I live, the 2025 Transalp retails for 11.5k after tax. Same goes for stock Tenere, and Aprilia tops at 11.8 thousand euro. The 890R I kept throwing in as a comparison, that's 16,000 euros list price. The kicker? This exact CF Moto comes in at just 9,000 euros. Sure, prices may vary slightly, but look at it this way.
I could get an 800 MTX, a 450 MT, and have money left over for 200 Starbucks coffees. That's without even considering the extra electronic packs you need to acquire for that KTM. Suddenly, when you throw pricing into the mix, most other bikes don't even compare. They don't matter, except maybe the Cove.
For people complaining, rightfully so, that motorcycle prices have gotten out of control, this is a well-received pill of normality. And that's the real story of the CF Moto, the kicker. The reason why I think this motorcycle is a revolution. It brings in top-class performance at a price leagues below its competitors. At that point, it gets kinda hard to justify buying anything else, really. Look, there are a few icks I still have with this bike. For one, the rims are really wide, making mounting enduro tires a proper pain in the rear end.
Why are we sitting on the side of the road here?
You don't end up like we are with a flat rear tire. We ride with a tube in this one just to try to play a little bit with the pressure.
We played a bit too much with the pressure, maybe?
Yes, we run it too low and now we have a flat. So
the menu system also can be confusing at first. Like, no guys, nobody needs a quick access shortcut to adjust the screen brightness. Do you get used to it? Sure, you also get used to hemorrhoids. Also, the blipper requires quite a bit of force to activate when shifting down.
But then, on the other hand, you get a 3+2 year warranty. And cruise control, a feature and a hill I am willing to die on. Every single middleweight adventure bike should have cruise. If KTM could put it on their new 390, every other manufacturer can. I'm mostly looking at you, Japan.
And the thing is, the CF Moto manages to do all that while still being a good road bike. Sure, our setup was heavily off-road biased, but the engine packed more than enough punch for some fun and overtaking. The windscreen made street riding with a dirt bike helmet actually enjoyable for myself. Oh, and did I mention it has cruise control?
You call and keep on asking, is it too late for us? The answer I keep giving, isn't it obvious? Our love has turned to nothing, but before I go, you should know, you owe me years and years of happiness.
What CF Moto has done here is not new, not revolutionary. Every single feature has been seen before. But critically, rarely has it been seen before together, added up, and at an affordable price point. A price that, from the showroom floor, gives you a great base to start adventuring on.
So on this bike we put other tires. We put some enduro tires, which is it's a good idea. It can be wet and slippery out there. It's not all big gravel road like we have here. Just some small personal. I put a different handlebar with a different angle that I prefer to ride with. And from besides of that, it's a stock bike. Like this 800 is ready with some decent tires on, and you can go.
Sure, it's not a big dirt bike. None of them are. But it's a big bike that can, and I truly believe this, hold its own against the 890R, while hopefully being more reliable. A great bike from a big manufacturer with good support, at a great price. You see, this is why the CF Moto is so important. It answers most of our demands.
Or at least, shall I say, my demands. Because after riding one, I have to say, I'm really tempted.